Alysa Reynolds, a talented and passionate interior designer living in Boston, has a rising career and a perfect life with her fiancé, Ethan. But everything changes in an instant when she receives a cold email from Ethan, ending their 3-year relationship with just 4 short sentences. Not only is she betrayed in love, but she also faces the dark secrets Ethan has been hiding all along. What will Alysa do when everything falls apart? How will she overcome the pain? And more importantly, how will she seek revenge when she uncovers the dark truths behind Ethan's betrayal? Follow Alysa's journey to discover how she finds herself again and reclaims what was taken from her. I still remember the first time I met Ethan. We met at a fundraising gala where he represented a large investment firm. He wasn't just handsome, he was incredibly smart, charming, and magnetic. They say if anyone can make you feel like you're the center of their world, it's Ethan. And I was immediately drawn to him. He listened to me, shared jokes, and made me feel like I was the most important person in his life. We started seeing each other more often, and I quickly realized I was in love with him. Ethan wasn't just a great man, he was someone who truly understood me, who knew how to care for me. The nights when he would cook for me, the soft candlelight, the sound of laughter, it all felt like a dream. He always knew how to make me feel special, even in the smallest gestures, like holding my hand while we walked down the street. It felt so wonderful, as if I were the only woman he wanted by his side for the rest of his life. And then Ethan proposed on a starry night. We stood on top of a hill, a gentle breeze blowing, and he knelt down looking at me with eyes full of love. "You're the only one I want to share the rest of my life with," he said. I cried, unable to believe I had found such a perfect man. At that moment, I thought I had found my destiny, the one I would build a family with and grow old together. But not long after, the signs began to appear. It started with sudden phone calls in the middle of the night, where he was always out or saying he was in a meeting, but I never actually saw any meetings take place. The expensive gifts he gave me seemed to be out of line with his income. Then there were the times I found out he was on business trips, but when I asked him, his stories didn't quite add up with what I had heard from others. I didn't want to believe these signs. Love made me blind, made me ignore any doubts, because I believed he loved me and I loved him too. But slowly, everything began to unravel. The business trips he mentioned were actually secret vacations with another woman, Claire, which I had accidentally discovered through some emails he left behind. That was the first shock. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling that something was wrong grew stronger and stronger. One morning when I woke up and checked my phone, I saw an email from Ethan. The message was short and cold. "I need to inform you that I've met someone else. Someone better. I won't be attending our wedding next month. I wish you well." That was all he sent me. 4 short, cruel sentences, enough to end a 3-year relationship. It was in that moment that I realized that the love I had for him didn't matter at all. The pain and confusion flooded my mind, but at the same time, another feeling began to rise. Anger. He thought that just an email would be enough to dismiss me and everything we had built. He had underestimated me. Rachel arrived quickly after she got my message. She walked into my apartment, her eyes full of concern but also anger. She sat down next to me, her face tense. You really can't believe this, can you?" Rachel said, her voice trembling with fury. "Who breaks up with their partner over email like that? You deserve so much more than this." I looked at her, my eyes still fixed on the phone screen, where Ethan's cold email was still displayed. I felt the pain beginning to rise, but there were no tears. Instead, I felt something stronger, a cold, surprising calm starting to take over me. "I've been tracking everything for the past 3 months, Rachel. All the signs pointed to him not being worthy of me," I replied, my voice steady. "I sold the engagement ring. I took the money from it and opened a new account. He won't know about it until the truth is exposed." Rachel stared at me, her eyes wide with surprise but also a hint of pride. You really prepared for this, didn't you?" I nodded, not needing to explain further. "Definitely. And now it's time for me to do what needs to be done." Boom. A week later, I sat across from Thomas Hayes, a private investigator that a former client had recommended. His office was nothing like what I'd imagined a detective's office to be. No dark, smoky rooms like in the movies, but a modern, bright professional space. Thomas sat right across from me, his tablet in hand, taking notes carefully. I opened my bag and pulled out a thick stack of documents, placing them on the table. These are the transaction records, hotel invoices, jewelry, and expenses I can't explain. He's living beyond his means, I said, looking directly at Thomas. Thomas flipped through the documents I handed him, then looked back at me with a calm, focused gaze. I'll take a closer look, but I think we're headed toward a major scandal. Ethan isn't just cheating on you. He's destroying his own life. I felt a part of me relieved, but the rest of me was still filled with anger. Not just because of Ethan's betrayal, but because of everything he had done to me over the past 3 years. Upastam. Thomas provided me with some information about Claire, the woman Ethan was having an affair with. After hearing it, I wasn't surprised anymore. But what made me even more furious was that Ethan was planning to run away with Claire, starting a new life together in Chicago. He's not just cheating on me, he's running from his debts, using me as a shield, I said, my voice hoarse with anger. I can't let him get away with this. I want him to face everything. Thomas nodded, then continued. I understand, but to do that, we need a clear strategy. I'll make sure we have all the information needed to ensure Ethan can't escape. The day I had been preparing for finally arrived. Ethan and Claire stood at my front door. Ethan looked at me with a confident expression, but as he stepped inside, he had no idea I had set everything up. I had invited Richard, his boss, to be there, and I had prepared all the evidence to expose everything Ethan had done. When I opened the door and saw Ethan and Claire standing there, I felt like everything was finally falling into place. Although my heart still ached, anger took over. I didn't need to hide my emotions anymore. Ethan looked at me, his confidence slowly fading. Alysa, this is a misunderstanding. We can talk calmly, he said, his voice not as certain as before. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice firm and cold. There's no need to talk, Ethan. This misunderstanding has been resolved. Everything you've done will be known. Rachel stepped forward, opening the boxes I had prepared. Emails, hotel invoices, documents showing how he used my money to maintain a lavish life with Claire. Everything Ethan thought he could hide was now laid out in front of him. Rachel couldn't hold back her anger anymore. You think you can fool anyone? What about these invoices? How do you explain all this? Ethan stood frozen, staring at the papers in front of him, then looked at Claire. She lowered her head, saying nothing. At that moment, all of Ethan's confidence vanished completely. I felt a sense of satisfaction swell inside me. Just days later, Ethan was fired from his company. The evidence I provided to Richard helped him uncover all of Ethan's financial misconduct. Claire was also investigated for violating company ethics and had to quit her job. Both of them faced the consequences of their deceit. I returned to my work, no longer worried about Ethan. Our story had ended, and I knew that this betrayal had opened a new opportunity for me. That day, I sat in my office, looking out the window, feeling a sense of peace that I had never known before. I had once believed love was everything, but now I knew that the truth was the strongest weapon, and I would never accept being lied to again. With my new career and the big projects ahead, I began to believe that I was the only one who could decide my own worth. Just days later, Ethan was fired from his company. The evidence I provided to Richard helped him uncover all of Ethan's financial misconduct. Claire was also investigated for violating company ethics and had to quit her job. Both of them faced the consequences of their deceit, but that wasn't the end. I wasn't ready to let it all go so easily. Ethan had thought that his lies and manipulation could destroy me, but I knew he hadn't faced the full consequences of his actions yet. He had hurt me, lied to me, and treated me like I was nothing more than a disposable part of his life. And now I was going to make sure that he would face everything he had done, not just in his personal life, but professionally as well. I had already handed over the emails, receipts, and other damning evidence to Richard, but that wasn't enough. Ethan was too smooth, too manipulative to be easily taken down. I knew that the only way to really hit him where it would hurt was to ensure he never got away with what he had done, not just in his personal life with Claire and me, but in his business dealings as well. His fraudulent financial practices, the debts he had been covering up with lies and deception, they were the key to his downfall. I sat down with Richard once again, this time in a more private setting, away from the eyes of Ethan's colleagues. Alysa, calmly, I want you to dig deeper, Richard. Ethan might have lost his job, but I know he's already working on his next move. He's good at bouncing back, and I don't want him to be able to rebuild without facing the consequences of his actions. Richard nodding. I understand, and I'll make sure this doesn't slip through the cracks. The evidence you provided has already raised a red flag at the company, but we'll dig into his side deals and the other financial discrepancies. That was when things really started to unravel for Ethan. I knew that getting him fired wasn't going to be enough to truly make him understand the pain and destruction he had caused. So I worked with Richard to find every last connection and financial transaction Ethan had made under the radar. The hidden investments, the false reports, the shady deals that he thought no one would notice. In the weeks that followed, I watched as Ethan's world crumbled even further. The company had been forced to conduct a full internal audit after Richard flagged his suspicious activities. It wasn't long before Ethan was linked to several illegal financial schemes that put the company's reputation at risk. Worse, some of the money he had been funneling through his personal accounts had connections to offshore accounts, which could have led to much bigger trouble, potential charges of money laundering. Ethan had been good at covering his tracks, but he had underestimated one thing: me. I wasn't just going to let him walk away unscathed. By the time the investigation reached its peak, Ethan's firm had been forced to publicly acknowledge the financial fraud under his watch. The public relations nightmare was something that Ethan would never have been able to recover from. To make matters worse, the authorities were closing in on his financial dealings. He had run out of time. He had thought he could escape to a new life in Chicago with Claire, but that wasn't going to happen. Claire had already distanced herself from him, and when the full scope of Ethan's financial crimes was revealed, she went silent, no longer willing to be part of his web of lies. I had done everything I could to ensure that Ethan faced the consequences of his actions, and now it was time for him to deal with the fallout. Weeks later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Ethan had tried to make contact with Richard again, begging for a second chance. Not at work, but in the hopes of salvaging what little dignity he had left. He had lost everything: his job, his reputation, and even his relationship with Claire, who had completely cut him off. He had burned every bridge. I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. He had thought he could walk away from me so easily, but I had made sure he paid for everything, in ways that he never expected. He was no longer the charming, smooth-talking businessman who once thought he had the world in his hands. Now he was nothing more than a man who had been exposed for the fraud he truly was. A month later, I was sitting in my new office, a sleek and modern space that I had worked hard to design myself. It was my first official day working on a corporate project for a major client, one that had come about thanks to Richard's recommendation. As I walked around my new office, feeling the excitement of this new chapter in my life, I realized just how far I had come. The pain from Ethan's betrayal was still there, buried deep in my heart. But I had finally learned to turn that pain into something stronger. It had fueled me, driven me to build a life I could be proud of. I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not Ethan, define my worth ever again. And so my life moved forward. I was no longer the woman who had been deceived by a charming smile and false promises. I was now the woman who controlled her own destiny. The truth had been my weapon, and with it, I had built something meaningful, a future that was all my own. Ethan, on the other hand, was left with nothing but the aftermath of his own lies. And as far as I was concerned, that was all he truly deserved. But although things had started to settle down, I knew I still had to learn how to trust again, not just in love, but in the people around me. Life wasn't as simple as I had once thought, but these challenges only made me stronger. And then one day I met Sam. Sam was a new acquaintance in the design world. We met by chance when I took on a large project from a major real estate company. Sam was a partner in an architecture firm that had worked with me on previous projects. He was calm, full of energy, and had a very practical perspective on work and life. He wasn't like Ethan or anyone I had met before. Sam was different. He didn't need to show off to impress anyone. He was a man with a strong personality, but he was also sincere and never rushed to judge anyone. Lounged Sam, smiling lightly as we met for the first time in a meeting. "I've heard you have a great eye for design, Alysa. I think we'll work really well together." Alysa, smiling back. "I hope so. I've always believed that a beautiful space can change everything." Sam wasn't just a professional partner. He quickly became someone I could rely on. We often chatted, shared ideas about work, and sometimes even stories outside of business. One day after a long workday, as we sat down for coffee, he looked at me with an understanding gaze. Looking at me, his voice gentle but direct. Alysa, I've heard a little about your story, but I can also see you've moved on. It's truly admirable. I wasn't surprised that he knew about Ethan. My story wasn't a secret in the industry, especially as I started gaining more recognition in the design community. But the way Sam said it made me feel more at ease. He didn't dredge up old wounds, but simply acknowledged my strength. Alysa, smiling lightly, shrugging. Sometimes it just takes a little time and patience to realize that everything will be okay. Mas Sam, nodding. Exactly, I've been through tough times too, but you know what? Life isn't always easy, but we can always choose how we face it. Sam's words made me feel lighter. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid to be vulnerable. Sam wasn't rushing me into anything. He was just being there, letting me take my time. Over the next few weeks, I started creating situations to challenge myself. I still felt the nagging doubt about my feelings for Sam. So I decided to see how he would react in more stressful situations. One evening, after an important meeting with a client, Sam and I went out for dinner to discuss the project further. I looked into his eyes, feeling the warmth between us, but there was still that inexplicable feeling. I felt like I had to test him, to see if he was patient enough to deal with me and my complicated emotions. Alysa, lightly teasing. Sam, do you think we can work together forever without facing a little tension or challenges? You don't think I'll find someone else like you, but I need to know if you're patient enough, love. It's really hard. Sam looked at me for a moment and then smiled softly. He didn't seem surprised or upset. Instead, he chuckled and nodded. Sam calmly understanding. Alysa, I get what you're going through. Love isn't a straight path. It has its twists and turns, its challenges. But I think we can face them together. He wasn't upset or impatient. In fact, his calmness and understanding made me feel more confident. He wasn't rushing me, and that was exactly what I needed. It was then that I realized the challenge wasn't in testing Sam, but in confronting my own fears. Wow. A few days later, I came to the conclusion that I needed to take a bigger step in confronting myself. Sam had proven he wasn't someone who would give up easily, but could I fully trust myself to be in a new relationship? I decided to test myself again, but this time the challenge was not about whether I could love Sam, but whether I could be loved without fearing betrayal. Alysa, directly while we were working late one night. Sam, I need to face this. I've been afraid to love again. After everything with Ethan, I don't know if I can open myself up to you, but I also know that I can't keep living in fear. Sam didn't respond immediately, but he walked over to me, his eyes soft and reassuring. He didn't need to say anything more. He just stood beside me, giving me the space and time I needed to process the emotions rising inside me. In the end, I realized that the challenge wasn't about testing love or patience. The real challenge was whether I could open my heart again, embrace a new love without doubt. And Sam, with his patience and sincerity, showed me that I didn't have to do this alone. Love wasn't always easy, but with understanding and trust, we could face whatever came our way. And finally, I was ready to love again. As the days went by, I could clearly feel the changes in myself. I was no longer the woman lost in the pain and betrayal of Ethan. Instead, I had become someone stronger, more confident, and clearer about what I wanted from life. My business, my design projects, began to grow. I was landing high-end clients, securing large contracts that I had only dreamed of before. But deep down, something still felt incomplete. Loneliness would sometimes creep in on late nights when I sat alone in my apartment, quietly gazing out at the city below. In those moments, I realized that I didn't want to live in a world of isolation. I needed love, but this time, I wasn't going to settle for anything less than what I deserved. I had learned a very important lesson. True love has to be built on respect and honesty, not empty words. One day, while preparing for a big meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Caption, text. I know you've come a long way, but you might want to hear this. Ethan's been reaching out. He contacted me, said he wants to apologize, but this time he's changed. I think he's in deep trouble and maybe he wants to make things right. I know you don't want to see him, but I think you should at least consider it. I read the message, and for a moment, I felt my thoughts returning to those early days with Ethan, when everything was still uncertain. I had thought I would never hear from him again, but for some reason Rachel's text made me hesitate. Was he truly trying to change, or was this just another game to get back into my life? I decided not to respond right away. I needed time to think it through, and I decided to meet with someone I hadn't seen in a while, Claire. I wanted to know what she thought, not just about Ethan, but about herself, about her life after everything that had happened. We met at a quiet cafe in the West End. She didn't look like the perfect, polished woman she had been in when I first met her. Claire had changed. She had short hair now, a simpler style, but there was a new confidence in her. Alysa was smiling as I looked at Claire. "Hey Claire, thanks for agreeing to meet me." She'll smiling gently, nodding. "Thanks for accepting. I know this might not be easy for you." We sat down, and for a brief moment, there was an awkward silence. Then Claire began to speak. It rose softly. "After everything that happened, I realized I was wrong. Ethan made me believe he was a great guy, but I was deceived by his words and his pretty face. I didn't know he had this whole life with you, and I really appreciate you for opening my eyes." Hearing this from Claire gave me an unexpected feeling. She wasn't a bad person. She had simply gotten caught in the web that Ethan had spun. But what surprised me more was how Claire seemed to have found peace. She had escaped Ethan's chaos, and now she was ready to start fresh. "Alysa," thinking for a moment, then speaking. "I used to think I couldn't forgive either of you, but now I realize I need to free myself from these negative thoughts. I don't want to stay stuck in the past anymore." Claire, smiling with the understanding in her eyes. "I get it. You did the right thing. You're strong, Alysa." After our conversation, I felt much lighter. Claire had chosen her path, and so had I. We both found freedom after the mistakes of the past, and I no longer felt the need to carry all that weight. The next day, I decided to call Ethan. I wasn't sure what I would say, but a part of me wanted to get closure, even if just for my own peace of mind. "Alysa," on the phone in a calm tone. "Ethan, I'm not angry with you anymore. I've learned a lot from our mistakes, but I think we're done." Ethan, silent for a moment, then quietly. "I understand. I just want you to know I regret it all." "Melissa," gently, "you had your chance to make it right, but now I just want to move on with my life. I don't need your forgiveness. I just need the truth. And now I'm ready to move forward." I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. My life was no longer dictated by painful memories. I had accepted the truth, and now it was time to walk my own path. No more wounds, no more doubts, just freedom and new opportunities. I stood in front of the window in my office, looking out. Boston was as busy as ever, but I felt like I was now a part of it. I had learned that everything in life can change, and sometimes the worst things that happen open the door to better opportunities. And I knew that wherever I went, whatever I did, I would always choose the truth and myself first. What did you think of Alysa's journey? Have you ever experienced betrayal? And how did you find the strength to move on? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story.